We've just started chapter 8, and I know that in the last episode, you two covered the new terminology that Krishna is introducing that even Arjuna did not know about, which we all thought that was quite unique, that Arjuna, knowing Sanskrit, that's how they're speaking, he still doesn't know the meaning of these words. And that just lets us know how important it is for us to understand the meaning coming directly from Krishna, from the Supreme Person. And so the first few verses just covers the terminology, which is 3 parts of how the world is made up, and really what a theology, the components of a theology, which is God, the soul, the world, and the relationship between each of those 3 parts. And then Krishna jumps in to what we're going to cover today. So that's where we're at. And just, I guess in general, the 8th chapter is very unique because it gives us a glimpse. It's like a window into ancient religion, this ancient culture of the Vedic religion. And it's uses a lot of Upanishadic language. And it's actually really amazing to be able to have an understanding of that, to be able to appreciate what Krishna is going to speak on during this part of the 8th chapter. And I think that we can all agree that we highly recommend that you listen to Tukaram's class, because he really gives a lot of detail and does such an amazing job explaining how each of the words in Sanskrit is used in the Upanishads, and how brilliantly Krishna is using that as a springboard to then teach us, or Arjuna, what the actual point of the Vedas is, what the Upanishads were intending, and how, if we can understand that language in the right frame of mind, we can actually attain him. And so, and if we don't do that, we get lost, right? Because it's such a it's the same conception, but it's a different kind of linguistics, right? And so I think that that's as much as the context that we want to give, so that we can jump into text 5. I believe that's what we're going to start on today. Anything else?
No, and for anyone who is new to listening, can you explain a little bit more about the Upanishads and how that relates to the Gita, or what they even are?
Oh God,
Or
that's a scary question.
just like
I
a
don't.
brief
Yeah,
description.
just like a general. I know um, it's really an ancient. It's one of the most ancient books that we have, scriptures in our tradition, and what it makes them so unique, and in a way so valuable, is the fact that Krishna, not Krishna, but the Supreme is talked about in such a impersonal way, but at the same time, very formal, very, I would even say, I don't know if you agree, Soza Prabhu, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the language is so formal and so academic, and so it's poetic, it's really beautiful, but it really lacks that intimacy and that personal voice that we see in the Gita. Obviously, Krishna here is speaking himself directly to his devotee, and everything that we could even hear of in the Upanishads, from or in a formalized way, with very beautiful poetic words to describe the Supreme, it's really directly in your face presented here in the Gita. So I would say it's just, scripture, part of the ancient scriptures. It's still part of our tradition, but it's definitely a little more distant than the Gita, which is very personal, very bhakti loaded, very easy to understand, because Krishna himself is actually speaking and digesting these terms and presenting them in a new way. So taking all that ancient wisdom and all of that and packaging it in I would say in a new bottle, like the example that Tukaram uses a lot. Having said that, I don't think I did it justice. I'm sure I'm missing a lot. I don't know a lot about the Upanishads specifically, but this is as far as I can share. Anything that I missed that you think would be important to mention, Prabhu?
I think you did a great job at covering for the purpose of our podcast here. It is a really big topic. Usually when we talk about the Vedic literature itself, it's difficult to comprehend how big that is. That it is made out of different categories of literatures. That's what the Vedic literature means. It's a compilation of many different categories of texts. So we have the traditional four Vedas, Rig Veda, Sama Veda, etc. Then there are the Upanishads. It's another category of literatures. And there's also the Bhagavatam is a part of, skipping my mind right now. What is it called, Varangi? The Bhagavatam is Srimad Bhagavatam is a...
Cream of the crop.
Yes, it is the cream of the crop, but not Samhitas. It's going to come to my mind soon. But anyways, so the Upanishads is one of the categories of the entire Vedic literature. If we were to translate literally, Upanishads means sitting close, sitting by the feet of your teacher. Right, so that's what Upanishads, if you translate from Sanskrit to English, that it means that sitting by the feet of your teacher, which really means that it was a tradition where a teacher was speaking and the student was listening really close by. So it communicates intimacy in terms of the students and the teacher, but also very esoteric terms, because these were ancient, highly elevated people having this very elevated discussions, and it was done by disciplic succession. And therefore the Upanishads are always questions and answers. That's why the disciple is asking questions and the teacher is explaining, right? So then the disciple is sitting by the teacher's feet. So that's literally what Upanishads means. So yeah, they are like one category of the Vedic literature, and it's very ancient. It precedes the Gita, the time that Krishna was on the planet, by many, many years. And Krishna refers to it in one sense to allow us to know that he wasn't speaking in a vacuum. There was a pre-existing tradition. He honors that tradition. He doesn't change it, but he refers to it and adds more meaning to it, especially in the sense that Varangi described, making it more personal, because it was quite impersonal, the terminology that was used. So Krishna 5,000 years ago, which in itself is already ancient, right? So then the Upanishads are many thousand years even before that. So Krishna 5,000 years ago, take those terminologies, which were quite esoteric, and make them more personal, which brings about more value. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to get to hear directly some of this language that was used back then, or in that text specifically. And so you'll be able to hear or get a taste of what that body of literature, how it described the Supreme, you know, and then Krishna taking that and saying, hey, this is me. This is actually when the Upanishads are talking about this, that actually means me. Like I'm speaking to you right now. This is the person they're describing. And so it's quite mind-blowing. This chapter is really wonderful. It's like it makes you feel like you're getting a ticket to the past, you know, and hearing the way that theology was described and the Supreme Personality was described, and then at the same time how that all of that can be put into practice today, and how Krishna is giving us that information and how we can become self-realized by following his advice on how we can think about this person. And he is that person. So it's quite brilliant and really interesting. So without further ado, I think we should dive
The
in.
word that skipped my mind earlier is Puranas. So
Oh, the Puranas.
the Puranas. So Srimad Bhagavatam is known as the Bhagavad Purana. And there are many other Puranas. There's the Shiva Puranas, there are the Brahma Puranas. Bhagavat means Bhagavan, which is a word for God. So
The
Bhagavat,
supreme.
yes. The Bhagavad Purana is what the Bhagavatam is. And the Srimad Bhagavatam itself is made out of 12 cantos, but many of these cantos have multi-volumes. And each one of these volumes is a book in itself. And that's just the Bhagavad Purana, which we know as Srimad Bhagavatam. There are many, many other Puranas. Then there are the Samhitas, there are the Upanishads, there are the 4 original Vedas. All this together is known as the Vedic literature. So the Upanishads is the one which differs from all of these others in the sense that it was spoken directly from the spiritual master to the disciple, and the disciple was sitting right by their teacher's feet. So the topics were very esoteric. So that's how the Puranas are distinguished from within the context of the Vedic literature. So yes, without further ado.
Thank you so much for the information, Prabhu. It's a great compliment.
All right, so I think our plan is to read from text 5 all the way to 22. So chapter 8, text 5 from 22, because those are the texts that we're going to cover today, and it will give us the full context for our points. And I believe Kim is our designated narrator.
Reader.
All right. Okay, starting with text 5. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he is sure to reach me. One should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything, as he who is the oldest, who is the controller, who is smaller than the smallest, who is the maintainer of everything, who is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable and who is always a person. He is luminous like the sun, and he is transcendental beyond this material nature. One who at the time of death fixes his life air between the eyebrows and by the strength of yoga with an undeviating mind, engages himself in remembering the Supreme Lord in full devotion will certainly attain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Persons who are learned in the Vedas and who are great sages in the renounced order enter into Brahman. Desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy. I shall now briefly explain to you this process by which one may attain salvation. The yogic situation is that of detachment from all sensual engagements, closing all the doors of the senses and fixing the mind on the heart and the life air at the top of the head. One establishes himself in yoga. After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, the supreme combination of letters, if one thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and quits his body, he will certainly reach the spiritual planets. For one who always remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain because of his constant engagement in devotional service. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains my abode never takes birth again. By human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. At the beginning of Brahma's day, all living entities become manifest from the unmanifest state, and thereafter, when the night falls, they are merged into the unmanifest again. Again and again, when Brahma's day arrives, all living entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they are helplessly annihilated. Yet there is another unmanifest nature, which is eternal and is transcendental to this unmanifested and manifested matter. It is supreme and is never annihilated. When all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. That which the Vedantists describe as unmanifest and infallible, that which is known as the supreme destination, that place from which, having attained it, one never returns, that is my supreme abode. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. Although he is present in his abode, he is all-pervading and everything is situated within him.
Thank you, Kim. That was very nice reading. So, Varangi, would you like to start sharing any realizations on these points?
I'm eager to hear from you, Prabhu. You had mentioned that you had some really valuable points, and so I'm eager to hear.
Well, they're valuable to me, and let's see, you're higher than I am, so maybe they're just like a intro point to you.
We can't start this. We'll never finish.
Okay, so let's go back. So text 5, Krishna says that whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me, meaning Krishna, alone, will attain his nature, Krishna's nature. Of this, there's no doubt. All right, that's text 5. Then on text 8, Krishna says, he who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, is sure to reach me. Well, it seems like Krishna is being a little redundant here. And why is that? And so text 6 offers a little bit of the beginning of the solution here. So text 6, Krishna says, whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. So we can take this text 6, as a general principle. Krishna is simply stating here that, hey, if you spend your entire lifetime thinking about something or doing something, that something is going to be so prominent in your consciousness that inevitably that is what you're going to think about when death comes. So that's a general principle. So now, that being a general principle, a specific instance of that would be Krishna. So if whatever you think about throughout your whole life is what you're going to think about at the end of your life, then specifically if you think about Krishna all your life and you act in devotional service, meaning your actions are dedicated to Krishna, then your entire consciousness is so soaked into Krishna that at the time of death, it is only natural that that is what you're going to be thinking about. So as in a specific instance of this general principle that Krishna is stating here, Krishna then urges Arjuna on text 7 by saying, therefore, O Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty, which is the summary of the entire first third of the Gita, that you do your duty without being attached to the results, meaning you do your duty and you think of me. Forget about the results, carry out your duties and think of me. So what jumps to my mind, and Tukaram spent a lot of time problematizing this, is that, hey, what if I do spend all of my life thinking about Krishna in one way or another through some kind of devotional service, and then I am walking down the street and a drunk person comes and hits me, and right before that I see that car coming and I think, oh my gosh, this car is going to hit me. And the last thought in my mind is, this car is going to hit me. Do I come back as a bus driver my next lifetime? That would seem very unfair. Like I spent all my life developing my love for Krishna, but now because that was my last thought, then that's what I'm going to attain. That is difficult to accept. So I wanted to comment on this by saying that, first of all, this is Krishna saying, right? That whatever you spend your entire life doing, that's what you're going to think about during death. Unfortunately, it's difficult to collect scientific empirical data on this topic because when people are dying, they die. We cannot ask them, hey, what was your last thought? Or see where did they go after this? We cannot do that empirically speaking. But if Krishna is saying that that's how it is, I think we are in good hands to believe him. However, in our tradition, we are not very fond of this, to just believe something perhaps naively or blindly. We are very much into getting some kind of evidence, some kind of rational evidence. And I have a story to share, which to me highlights this teaching more than anything else. The first time I heard, I had chills on my entire body. And to this day, I still think about this and it gives me chills everywhere. In our tradition, we have practically a saint. His name was Aindra. We refer to him as Tukaram Prabhu. He was an American devotee and then moved to India, Vrindavan more specifically, and never left. Staying in Vrindavan his whole life. He started a program called 24 Hours Kirtan, which literally means there's Kirtan going on for 24/7. Obviously, people are taking turns, but that particular Kirtan never stops. He was really into Kirtan. And honestly speaking, in my ignorance, when I heard some of his kirtans many years ago, I was like, well, I don't understand why is it that people are so into his kirtans, because their melodies, they're really difficult for me to follow. It's not something that you get so hyped up and start dancing to, because most people could not repeat his melody the way he did. But then it took me some years to realize that actually it's about pleasing the beloved in the way they want to be pleased. So Krishna has different moods throughout the day, throughout the night. Then he engages with some of his devotees in different pastimes. And according to the time of the day, according to the particular devotee that Krishna is interacting with, there is a particular sentiment that is captured in the melody of the kirtan. And he was an expert at pronouncing the melodies that would capture Krishna's mood, which is what would please Krishna best. So he was so expert at doing this that he is perhaps one of the most known Kirtaniyas in our entire movement. And again, he lived in Vrindavan and he never really left Vrindavan after he went there. Very, very popular devotee. I can't overstate how powerful he was in our movement, how known he was in our movement. Anyone who's into Kirtan would reference him as like the guy for us to know how to lead Kirtan properly, right? So anyways, unfortunately, quite a few years ago, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, there was an accident and he died. He left his body. The accident was pretty terrible if we were to think about. He
I think it
lived
was 2009. 2009. I had just started coming around the temple.
2009, right? So
Yeah.
quite some time ago, yes. And so the accident was this, he lived again in Vrindavan, and it was a small room that he lived. And unfortunately, that room, that the place around it caught on fire. And he was in his room while that happened, and I think it was throughout night. And devotees were obviously very terrified of what happened, because there's, this room is on fire. And people realize, oh, that is a dangerous room. So after the fire ended, people were very anxious to find him. Like, where did he go? Did he escape? Like, is he okay? Like, where is he? But unfortunately, he didn't escape. He was stuck in the room. I guess he couldn't get out. But the whole point of the story here is to highlight that imagine yourself in a room that is on fire. Like the closest thing I can come to that is thinking about 9/11, when the Twin Towers in New York collapsed. We're talking about 70, 80 floors here. The World Trade Center was really, really high, like 70, 60 floors. What would it take for you to jump from floor number 63? Because you're jumping to your certain death. There's no doubt about that. So, and just like jumping, like, and many people were jumping. If you guys remember seeing those scenes, like, what would it take you to jump? Only the agony of being stuck in a room full of fire. That is worse than jumping from the 70th floor of a building, of a skyscraper building. But even then, that agony of being in a room full of fire must be so terrible that you're jumping, right? Like, it's better to jump than to stay here. So it has to be terrible. So imagine your state of mind in such a situation. You are stuck in a room that is full of fire and you're going to die. Like, what would you think about? My previous example was a car is about to hit you. It's not as bad if you're stuck in a room full of fire. That is terrible. So when the fire was gone and the devotees realized that Ainda Prabhu was nowhere to be found, they entered his room only to find his burnt body laying on the floor, paying obeisances to his deities. That's how he left the world. Which to me is saying that in that agony, which would cause most people to jump from the 70th floor of the World Trade Center, in that agony, in that situation, his thoughts were Krishna. He thought about Krishna because he calmly lay down and pay full obeisances. Like, the way we do this is that you literally lay on the floor with your hands stretched out from your head towards your, like, sideways to your deities. That means you're paying your obeisances to your deities. And that is what Ainda Prabhu did. And just lay there until the fire consumed all of his body, and then he left the body. So for a yogi in our tradition, a bhakti yogi who has been trained, who loves Krishna ultimately, undeviatingly, who thinks about Krishna the whole time, who did what Ainda Prabhu did, even if you are stuck in a room full of fire and you're going to die, that is what you're going to be thinking about. So this is an example here that what Krishna is saying is not fantastic to the point that it's almost hard to believe. It is actually very doable. It's possible for a devotee like Ainda Prabhu. This is exactly what he did. And so Krishna is really urging us. This is a general principle. Whatever you spend your entire life doing, if you really develop an intense love for that thing, that is what's going to be in your mind, as Ainda Prabhu is an example of it. And therefore, Krishna is urging Arjuna, so therefore think of me, so that at the end of your life, as it was with Indra, you will think of me, and in that way, you will attain me without fail. So this is what I wanted to share for between texts 5 and 8.
Wow.
Thank you so much for that story. That's so moving and inspiring. But yeah, I can see why you had chills all over your body.
Yeah.
To know that, yeah, it is attainable and it is possible.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I thought, well, thank you for bringing up, excuse me, the problematization of this verse, or the opposite way of looking at it, which is, if I spend my whole life cultivating love for the Supreme, and, you know, at the time of death, I don't get to think about it, about him. You know, it really reminds me of that question that Arjuna had earlier on, which is, you know, Krishna, what happens if we don't succeed? If I don't succeed, if I take this path and we don't become successful at the time of, you know, at the end. And so it's so amazing how there's no loss in this path. And it really, like what you explained, it really highlights how important it is. Like, our actions and our habits are so important, that actually I was listening to a class by His Holiness Devamrita Swami, and he was explaining, and I love how he in his mood it's so, for me it's so potent, because it's like kind of making fun of like the way that people like me like to think. Like, come on, you think you're just gonna be like doing all the stuff that's gonna take you away from spirituality, and all of a sudden you think you're just gonna walk into heaven like at the end without having like any practice at all. Like, that doesn't, it doesn't work like that. He was saying that if we want a different lifestyle, then we have to start by first taking inventory of what we're doing on a day-to-day, the small things, the things that most of us will never think about. So, even just writing our list of what you do as soon as you open your eyes, like including brushing your teeth, taking a bath, going to work, eating, all of that is important. That should be part of your list. But taking inventory of every single thing that you're inclined to do, or that you like to do, or that you how you fill your days, because all those little moments, all those little habits is what makes up your whole lifestyle. So if we want to make a change, we have to know what we're doing first of all, and then make those small adjustments to then see a different result. And I thought it was such a simple way to explain how like we can actually change our life. It doesn't just happen by wishful thinking, like, oh, I wish I was this, I wish I was that. You need to put in some time, but also to make some changes, but also have in mind like where we want to go, and so hearing about this example that you gave, it really makes that conversation in the Gita more believable. It's like, actually there are people around us that have attained that mentality, that mindset. It's actually possible. And if we think about it, I have certainly seen that in my own life. Just thinking back just a few years ago, just making a little bit of changes. And today I'm like, wow, I can't believe I no longer want to do that. So just because I started with one little change, it has a ripple effect. And that has taken me to a lifestyle that I'm practicing today as like, it's as part of me as my breath. I don't even think about it anymore. It's just a habit. And of course,
really contrary to what your lifestyle used to be in the past, right?
yeah. And then thinking of where I'm at today and where I want to be, it's like, oh my God, I have so much work. But I have already tasted a little bit of that change. It's actually possible. So all I have to do is, okay, continue implementing little changes. Now it gets subtler and subtler, right? We hear this all the time. You start with the most gross things that you want to change, but then once you change those, then now you move into your mentality. What are those thoughts? What are those things that are stepping in the way of you becoming, I guess, more pure? You can say that word is a little weird, but yeah, becoming a little more cleaner mindfully. Your mind is becoming more clean, more purified, more prone to being able to hold the water of spirituality and topics and things like that. And so thank you for the way that you troubleshot these verses and the example that you gave. It also made me feel really grateful, because at the beginning, when you were reading the text, Prabhu, you were obviously reading or reiterating what Krishna just said, which was, one who quits his body, remembering me alone. And then as a great devotee that you are, you even said, meaning Krishna, like not me. It's like all the devotees like, okay, I'm reading this, but is Krishna really saying that? And a thought that I instantly had was, well, you are a devotee of Krishna, therefore you are a connection for somebody that doesn't have Krishna to get Krishna, because Krishna doesn't have love for himself. His devotee has that, and his devotee actually is the only one that could give that bhakti, that love to somebody else. So even if we cultivate a friendly relationship with the devotees, even if we just hear from a devotee, even if we just have some appreciation for the devotee at the time of death, that's all that is needed to get back to Krishna, because that devotee is that bridge, and Krishna himself says that. for Krishna, it's like his devotees are the most important. So just cultivating relationships with devotees is actually the secret to one day being able to fully think of Krishna, because we couldn't find out about Krishna if it wasn't for the devotees, right? We couldn't understand these topics if it wasn't by somebody that is explaining them. So I that's a thought I had when you said that. I was like, oh yeah, even if it was you, even if I die thinking about you, you're a devotee of Krishna, that's enough. We can, that's enough to get us out of this body into a better body on our like next life, or even go back home. Obviously it depends on our karma and our journey. Everybody has a different journey and all of that, but I was feeling really grateful. It's like, wow, even if we can't get to the point of thinking about Krishna makes this so much easier and so much more available, because he sends out all his representatives, the devotees. And it's amazing when we think about it and we hear. I haven't met somebody that doesn't know who the Hare Krishnas are. At some level, it's like, oh yeah, I got this book. Or are you the ones that used to sing in so and so park or the airport? Oh yeah, I once bought an incense stick. Oh my gosh, you guys are so funny. Like little things like that. Somebody has always just known or heard. And that is just like, it's so kind. Krishna really makes it so much easier for us to come in contact with him one way or another, to make it easier for us to practice that devotion that will hopefully get us to pass that last test, which is death. And that we see how the great devotees do it. It's like, man, that's what I'm working towards, And if I can't think of Krishna, then I hope I can think of anything that's related to Krishna. So anyway, those were the thoughts I had from this chunk.
Great. Okay. Kim, do you want to share anything?
No, I really liked your point, Varangi, about, okay, if I'm not thinking of Krishna, and then let me think, please, of something or someone associated with Krishna. I really like that idea.
Yeah.
It was triggered by Prabhu's humility. Not me. I'm like, yeah, even you. That's a nice way to think about it.
Don't think about me when you're dying, please. Think about Tukaram, if anything.
You and Tukaram are so intertwined in my life. It's like I could have never met Tukaram Prabhu if it wasn't for you. So you're just part of the mix one way or another.
Okay, so let's talk about the Gita. So text 9 has another very interesting point to me. One should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything, as he who is the oldest, who is the controller, who is smaller than the smallest, who is the maintainer of everything, who is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable, who is always a person. He is luminous like the sun. He is transcendental beyond this material nature. I first heard what I'm about to share from Rupa Nuga Prabhu, who is our vice president at the temple in Laguna Beach, who once made a point about the idea of Krishna knowing everything. And I would take a step back to highlight this point a little bit better, which is to say that there is one major way in which our tradition differs from, let's say, Christianity or Judaism and Islam, in that our prayers consists of many things, but one of these things is not asking Krishna for anything. So in our prayers, we don't ever ask Krishna for anything. And that was a little bit bizarre to me, especially coming from a Christian tradition, which embedded in the Jesus prayer itself is, our Father who are in heaven, give us our bread today. Like we are asking God for stuff. And quite frankly, it's natural, right? God has everything. He's the most powerful person. If I'm going to talk to him, I'm going to ask him for something. It seems natural. I was thinking about, oftentimes I had this thought in my mind as a entrepreneur, which is if I was to meet like this great business owners like Elon Musk, like the richest person on the planet right now, I would be like, hey man, you got like 5 million that I can borrow? I'm also, starting a company like you did. I would try to create some common ground and I would ask him for something. So what to speak of God who has everything? So it would be natural to embrace the idea that, well, we're going to ask God for something. But then when I first met the devotees in our tradition, I quickly realized that we don't ask Krishna for anything. And I thought, well, that's strange. Like, why not? Like, he loves us. He has everything. Why am I not going to voice to Krishna what my needs or wants are? He can help me out, make me happy. If God is all good, he wants to see me happy if he loves me, right? But then comes this point that Rupanuga made. Here in text 9 is Krishna saying, in one sense, teaching us how to meditate on him, because we are being told that we should think about Krishna undeviatingly. Well, what am I going to think about? Like, give me some help. Like Krishna doing what? Like, how should I be thinking about Krishna all the time? Well, Krishna is so, brilliant here that in this text, he's giving us insights on how he believes it would be good for us to meditate on him. And therefore he says, one should meditate on me as the one who knows everything. Now, if Krishna knows everything, and you believe in this Krishna that we're talking about here, who said this verse to Arjuna, guess what he knows? Everything you want, everything you desire, everything that you will or will not do, Krishna knows. And so what is the point of you asking him for anything? Because he already knows what it is that you want. But better than that, he also knows what you need, because your wants, especially if it's not purified, as Varangi was explaining earlier, it's coming through a mind that is full of material desires. And those wants, you may have it here, it's broken glass compared to the diamonds that Krishna is ready to give us. And so to engage in a prayer and say, hey, Krishna, please help me get into this university. Help me find a spouse. Help me whatever. Well, first of all, Krishna already knows you want that. So there's no need for you to tell him that. He already knows. And second of all, what he would actually give you is much greater than what you're asking for. And so the idea that we can meditate on God as he who knows everything would automatically prevent you from asking him for anything, because you would highlight how much of an atheist you are, because you don't, either atheists or, in the literal sense of the word, ignorance, because you're not really aware of what is God's qualifications. He knows everything. So why would you ask him for anything? And instead, we just want to give him something. We want to give him our love, our time, our thoughts. By using our free will, we want to give him these things, and we don't ask Krishna for anything. So the first time I heard Rupanuga mentioning this point, that, hey, he knows everything, why would you ask him for anything? So he explained to me why is it, one of the reasons why we don't ask God for anything in our prayers. I wanted to share that point with you guys.
Wow. I had never heard of that nuanced perspective. It's really nice. There were so many things that from that one verse or that one strand of information you could ask, and I don't want to get off topic, but we have to bring it up for those of you that are just joining us. When you mention, God knows everything, so what's, that does not mean that we do not have free will. It's not predetermined. What that means is that God, or Krishna, knows all the possibilities there are. He doesn't know what you're going to choose because you have free will. You can choose one thing or another. He knows those possibilities, but he doesn't know which one you're going to choose because he respects that free will. So it's not that's not what was meant when we say, God is, he knows everything. And so it's nice that you were focusing on the part of he knows our needs, he knows our desires, he knows our heart. He's not fooled by what we're giving him. He knows what we're holding back, right? He knows everything. So in that sense, but also we still maintain our free will. We still maintain that choice to do something that will bring us closer to spirituality, to divinity, or do something that takes us away. But he still knows all the possibilities. So I thought that was something that was valuable to bring up, just to reiterate that although he knows everything, that doesn't mean that it's predetermined. We still have a choice and we have free will, and that never gets taken away. And then the other thing, which of course I forgot. Yeah, yes, I remember.
While that point comes to your mind, thank you for bringing that up. It absolutely does not take our free will away. And I have an example. So on Fridays, we at my home, my wife and I have, we agreed that we would allow our oldest son to decide what it is that he wants to eat for dinner, right? So he could choose whatever he wants, and mommy would make. And so he's going to say that he wants to eat pizza. Like, there's no doubt about that. I know that because I know him. He has any possibilities. He can choose whatever he wants. But I know for a fact he's going to choose to eat pizza. Or if it's not pizza, it's going to be noodles, right? So I know it's going to be one of these two things that he's going to choose because I know him so well. Now, if I know this of my child, what is it that Krishna doesn't know about us, right? So I know all different possible outcomes, but I also know which one he's going to choose, but it doesn't keep him from saying, hey, tonight I just want to eat broccoli and that's it. He can still exercise his free will and say, I just want to eat broccoli. It's up to him. But he's going to choose pizza. There's no doubt about that.
What a nice example. That's it. Yeah, exactly. Who knows us better than our, parents?
Yep.
Beautiful. The other thing that I was thinking about when you brought up the conception and other traditions of asking God, not conception, the practice of asking God for stuff really stems from a different conception of divinity. Those traditions regard Krishna as the father. Even that's part of the whole prayer. So it's a different mentality. Our parents give us everything. We ask for everything. That's normal. It makes sense. In our tradition, the Vaishnava tradition is totally the opposite. We think of Krishna as our baby, as our son. So divinity, that supreme personality, although he is the beginning of everything, the end of everything, like we hear in this text, this is direct language from the Upanishads. He is the ones that knows everything. He is the oldest, he is the controller. So he's the Alpha and the Omega. Even though he represents that, he is that, the devotee chooses to see him as a son because the baby, your child, requires everything from you. But as a parent, you don't want anything from your child. You just love, unconditionally. I'm not a parent myself, so I can't, there's some limitation to that realization in my own life. But I am a daughter, so I have experienced that unconditional love. And even from my spiritual fathers and mothers, their unconditional love towards me is just like mind-blowing. I don't even understand it. They love me so much on a spiritual level, even though I'm not their biological child. So it is possible. But I know, Sosa Prabhu, you can definitely attest to this. It's like there's nothing that your children could ever do or not do to ever warrant you stop loving them or stop being there for them. So it actually requires a mental shift, a perspective shift of seeing Krishna or God as your child. You want to offer everything to them. You want him to you want to be their servant. It's like, I want to do everything for you. And I don't need anything back. I do need everything from you, but I don't want to ask you anything because I know you love me. And so it's a different perspective. And so it makes sense when God is your father, it makes sense to ask. But when you regard God as your child, then automatically that feeling of wanting to ask for stuff goes away. And of course, is a process. I do ask Krishna for stuff, and it is also encouraged that at any point it's better to ask Krishna for stuff than anybody else, because at least you're trying to connect to Krishna. But the goal is to get to the point where we don't feel like we need to ask for anything because we have it all. Just the fact that we're connected to Krishna, that should be enough for us. And to be able to come to that realization, once we come to that realization, we actually stop asking for stuff. And so I just wanted to point out that it really just lies on the core. What's your conception of divinity? And according to what the conception is, then your actions play out in a certain way. And so, yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Varangi.
Yeah, thank you. These perspectives have really helped me, because the whole prayer aspect, coming from a conservative Christian background, has always been a confusing topic for me, because I learned early on about this idea that, well, we don't really, it's not our program to ask Krishna for things. And so when I first started coming to the temple, I made it a point, like, don't pray for things. And I had a major conflict with someone when I first came in, and through a couple of major events, it got completely resolved. And I hadn't prayed about it. I hadn't asked for anything about it, and it just got resolved. And then there was another area of my life where all of a sudden I started getting blessings in this certain area, and success in this area. And I hadn't prayed about that either. So this idea that Krishna knows what we're struggling with and what we need, and the idea of free will, I really liked your point in bringing that up, Varangi, about, okay, we have the choice of noodles or pizza. And I asked Tukaram Prabhu about this once, actually, when that conflict had gotten resolved, about, I didn't even pray for it. So I really didn't see the value in praying much after that. It's like, wow, Krishna really does know. And he brought up the point of free will, and he said, yeah, sometimes it's nice to talk about what things are you're most worried about, or what things are a bigger priority to you, just have some sort of dialogue as kind of a compromise or a happy medium for where I am in my relationship with Krishna. He said it was okay to, just tell him what's most troubling to you, or because I have all these options. And so I thought that was an interesting perspective too. So yeah, I really like this conversation, and I liked your perspectives on it. It's very helpful.
Thank you for sharing. One point that did come up, it's not that in our tradition prayer is invaluable. It's actually so valuable. It's like the core of our tradition. But can one of you two briefly explain like what an actual prayer looks like for a Vaishnava? Because I don't want it to sound like prayer is like, okay, out the window, we don't pray at all. Because obviously prayer is a core part of our daily practice. But what does the prayer look like if it's not asking Krishna for stuff?
So this is a very interesting point, Varangi. It is one of the core parts of our tradition, and the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, I would say, is filled with prayers. Various devotees, very, very elevated devotees, and they're praying to Krishna, and their prayers are absolutely amazing. And I'm looking for one of them here that I may read to you guys. It is, essentially our prayers are us glorifying Krishna. We are highlighting Krishna's qualities. We are essentially telling Krishna how awesome he is. And there's one particular devotee in our tradition. His name is Jurveda Prabhu. He is absolutely fantastic. If you are ever feeling down and you listen to him and his poetry, you're going to go way up. And I have no doubts of that. And I'm looking for a particular part that he says here. Anyways, I don't want to do this live. I will come up with it, and I will come up.
I appreciate the fact that you brought up how our seniors, our saints in our tradition they have the most beautiful prayers. And also the fact that even if we don't have one of our own, we can recite their prayers and put that prayer on our altar so that one day that prayer can manifest as our own. And so that's another way that in our tradition we honor those prayers by our, by our teachers. And also the Maha Mantra, japa meditation, is a prayer as well. We're crying out, we're focusing all of our senses in reciting the name of Krishna. And so when we are doing that, our heart is completely reaching out, crying out for Krishna to give us service, to connect, to allow us to connect to him and remember him. And by this mantra meditation, which is a daily practice for us, then that becomes the overall theme of prayer in our whole life, right? And the goal is to never stop chanting, not just once we're done with the 2 hours or with the 16 rounds we're done, but is to have this mantra, this prayer continue to inundate our thoughts throughout the day, our hearts, and eventually never stop chanting, like we saw Srila Prabhupada doing. Even though he was so involved in developing the Hare Krishna movement, he was so busy, he was always chanting. And that's also a form of prayer. And so, yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
So I have this one part. So Jurveda Prabhu, he takes all these Sanskrit poems that have been written by our previous acharyas, and then he translates them into English, but he makes them rhyme as they do in Sanskrit. But as we read them in Sanskrit, it doesn't really mean much to us. But what he does is he will convert them to English and make them rhyme again without deviating from the core meaning. He captures the exact meaning that was meant in the Sanskrit, but in English. And I'm having a hard time finding it here, but unfortunately, just this one little piece is coming to my mind right now. And he says something like this. He says, this entire universe is a vast, endless void. O Govinda, by your absence, I am being destroyed. Right? So it's to say that Govinda is a name for Krishna. And then he's just stating, so his prayer, he's telling Krishna, hey, Krishna, this entire universe is a vast, endless void. And by your absence, I am being destroyed. So, and then he goes on and on and on, and he talks such beautiful poetry. But these are the prayers. We are telling Krishna about his own glory, how beautiful Krishna is, how we are in separation from Krishna, how we long to be with Krishna again. And this is how our prayers take place.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one other point that it was inspiring to me as I listened to Kim reading the text that we're covering today, which is the part where he reads, by human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day. And such also is the duration of his night. So there is one other point I would like to talk about, which is text 17, where Krishna reads, where Krishna says, by human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day. And such also is the duration of his night. So I wanted to go into details of what Krishna exactly means here. And there's a reason why I want to do that. So an age here really means a cycle of 4 yugas. So 4 yugas put together is one cycle, okay? And that is one age. That's what that one age means here. And so the first of the 4 yugas is known as the Satya Yoga. During the Satya Yoga, the Satya Yoga lasts for 1,728,000 years. And that is the first yuga of the cycle, which is known as an age, okay? Then the yuga after that is known as the Taitra Yuga. The Treta Yuga lasts for 1,296,000 years. Then after that, the third yuga is known as the Dwapara Yuga. That yuga lasts for 864,000 years. And finally, the last yuga, which is the yuga that we currently find ourselves in, is known as the Kali Yuga. So we currently live in the Kali Yuga. And the Kali Yuga lasts for 432,000 years, of which 5,000 years has passed, which is when Krishna essentially left the planet. Kali Yuga started. It's been 5,000 years since then. So we are 5,000 years into Kali Yuga, which will last for 432,000 years. When you get these 4 yugas together, that is one age. So when Krishna says 1,000 ages put together, it means 1,000 times these 4 yugas put together. If we add that number, if we do that math, it means that the Brahma's one day will last for 311 trillion years, 40 billion years. So I don't know about you guys, but a million of anything, I can still wrap my mind around. When you get to a billion, like, yeah, theoretically, I can wrap my mind around, but a billion of anything is already so much. But certainly when you say a trillion of anything, there's nothing in my reality that is a trillion times of anything. It is out of my capability of conceiving it. So Brahma's one day is 311 trillion years for us. 311 trillion years and 40 billion, okay? However, what Krishna also says, such also is the duration of his night, right? So you put all this together, you get this inconceivable amounts of time. Now, why did I wanted to talk about this? Is because of something else we do in our tradition, something else that we hold in high regards in our tradition, which is the concept of humility, the concept that we should be humble. And the question will come, of course, if you are an aspiring devotee in our tradition, is, well, how do I become humble? Well, maybe because you're not humble and you're asking the question, how do we cultivate humility? And it is quite difficult, right? I know how to get bigger muscles, right? You go to the gym and you lift weights. So I cultivate strength by doing that. But how do I cultivate something as subtle as humility? That's what this is meant for. This verse, if we really contemplate, if we really meditate about the duration of time as being 311 trillion and 40 billion years, that is the duration of Brahma's life. And that Brahma's life, the 311 trillion years, takes place by Vishnu, which is a manifestation of Krishna, excelling, right? So Krishna inhales and exhales. When he exhales, that's when the 311 trillion years starts. And then when he inhales, the entire cosmic manifestation goes back into his breath. And continuously he breathes in and out. Now, if you try to hold your breath for 1 minute, it's going to be painful. Vishnu is holding his breath for 311 trillion years, which is the duration of Brahma's life, right? So when you truly meditate on that, what is any of your likes and dislikes? What is the point of any of that? We are so insignificantly small compared to time itself, compared to the cosmology that we're being introduced here. It is so tiny, our lifespan. Like maybe we will live 100 years, more likely about 90 something. Compare 90 years to 311 trillion years. You know how much more has happened and will happen besides your own likes and dislikes? All the things you want and all the things you don't want really is meaningless compared to the time span, right? And so if you want to cultivate humility, if you want to be humble, just think about that all of your likes and all of your dislikes, everything you love and everything you hate exists for about 90 years, but the whole thing of which you are a tiny part will exist for 311 trillion years. We think about Joe Biden, the most powerful man on the planet. Okay, The United States is a small country compared to the Roman Empire, when the Roman Empire was at its peak. If we were to say, okay, who was the last Roman emperor? Do any of you guys know what was the name of the last Roman emperor? We don't know, right? I know that one of the last five was Marcus Aurelius, but that's about it. But there was five. He was one of the five. I don't know who the very last one was. And the Roman Empire was much bigger than the United States. And it was around, not about, 2000 years ago when Jesus was around. So now we already forgot we don't even know what the name of the Roman emperor was. That was 2000 years ago. Can you think what's going to be of your desires, everything you love and everything you hate in 300 trillion years from now, since you're not the Roman emperor? It's nothing. It really has no meaning. We are very tiny. We are very small. Like Prabhupada said it best, imagine a bunch of zeros. That's us. And as much as you continue to focus on your own loves and hates, it's just adding a bunch of zeros to that immense number of zeros already. The only thing we can do is put one in front of all these numbers, and that one is Krishna. And in that sense, you become very valuable and very meaningful if you have Krishna, if Krishna is part of your lifestyle, is part of your consciousness. But otherwise, if there is no Krishna, it's just a bunch of zeros, because really, what does it matter? Everything that you love and everything that you hate in the face of 311 trillion years. So if you think about that, you know how small we are, and you're certainly going to develop humility.
Thank you. That's a really nice point. I like how you broke down the ages too, or all the years that make up an age. And it's a very sobering point to realize, oh, we're just here for a second.
We are here for 90 years at most, and we will leave very soon. It happens in a blink of an eye, and it doesn't really matter. What's going on out there in our material existence is much greater than our loves and hates. And just meditate on that. Make you humble, It's not that important. It's going to vanish like the name of the last Roman emperor that we don't even know. Most people won't even know all the things that we liked or disliked in our tiny little existence,
Yeah, thank you. It also points to the fact that humility is something that we can all cultivate. It's not something that, oh, I'm humble, or I was not born humble, so I'm just not. It's something that we can cultivate by, getting knowledge of our reality. When we start realizing the truth, then we realize how tiny we are, but also how valuable we are. But how we can be our best is by connecting to the supreme best. Just like the spark of a fire can imbibe all the qualities of the fire when it's closest to the fire, but once that spark goes away, it fumes out. It's an ash. And so, yeah, humility is definitely something that can be cultivated. And the more we surround ourselves with humble people, it's like a contagious disease, a good one. We catch it too. And obviously reading these things, it's like the best medicine for not having humility. It's we understand how great Krishna is. It's like, oh my, what am I doing? If I'm not doing something to praise him, like, just a waste of time. What am I trying to do? So thank you for that. I know that we're super over time now. We didn't finish the rest of the portion that we read or that we went through with Tukaram Prabhu, but maybe we can cover next episode and add on to the next class that we will hear from him next Friday. But this was an amazing episode. We covered a lot of ground and really good topics. So thank you for sharing, Prabhu. Your points were super valuable.
Yeah, thank you both. All right. Well, we encourage everyone to tune in. You can tune in live to Tukaram Prabhu's Friday night class, and it's always a great class. You can see the episodes replayed online as well. So if you miss a class, it's always available. All right. Thank you guys, and we'll see you again next week. Haribol.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.